It is so bad, the misinformation that is given to the American people because the established order thinks it's the way it should be.
He is the former White House Chief Strategist to Donald Trump and former executive chairman of Breitbart News. Yes, I'm talking about Steve Bannon. Hello and welcome to the GZERO World Podcast, where you'll find extended versions of the interviews from my show on public television. Today, I'll get into it with a man who not only had the president's ear, but who has since become a lead evangelist abroad for his own particular brand of nationalism. We'll talk about China, impeachment, populism, presidential politics, and why ancient Sparta may offer a clue or two into this White House. Obama was Athens. Let's get into it.
The GZERO World Podcast is brought to you by our founding sponsor, First Republic. First Republic, a private bank and wealth management company, places clients' needs first by providing responsive, relevant, and customized solutions. Visit firstrepublic.com to learn more.
Steve Bannon, good to be with you.
Thanks for having me.
Last time you and I talked, we talked a fair amount about impeachment.
Yes.
And you at that point said that Nancy Pelosi was teaching a masterclass.
Yeah.
Now that it's almost concluded,
Yeah.
how do you think
See, I
she's
disagree
done?
with the president on this. I do think she has done this, and here's why. She realizes, I think, the Democratic field is so weak from a personality point of view. There's no real star wattage. She also, I think, realizes the policies, the Democratic Party's been driven pretty far left on policies, so neither personality or policy can defeat Trump.
So you think she wants to run on impeachment?
I think not run on impeachment. What she wants to do is every day to try to destroy Trump. I mean, they've done a tremendous job of just hammering. That's why this week when the acquittal vote comes, it's just the curtain comes down on Act One. They're going to continue to subpoena. I mean, they've already said, hey, this part of the impeachment may be done, but Ukraine's not done. They're going to continue to. They're going to get Bolton up there. They're going to try to get Bolton's notes.
They'll try to get Bolton.
Yeah, but I think the House is actually going to subpoena Bolton and then force the administration to go to court and fight over executive privilege, a separation of powers issue. So no, I think Nancy Pelosi, for what she had to play with, to work with, I think she's done a job of trying to tie up President Trump and the opportunity cost of focusing on other things. Now you can question, hey, was that in the best interest of the nation? But in their perspective, he's a clear and present danger. So she will pull out any stop. So I think from what she had to work with and what she's done, I think she's done a good job. Now, I think it's actually emboldened President Trump, and I think it's strengthened President Trump, or particularly his base. So
because the polls will tell you that Trump has raised a lot of money, a lot more than the Dems have, on the back of impeachment, and he certainly hasn't lost support across the country.
Look, the polls are all over, but I think it generally shows that people dropped interest in the impeachment, and he's marginally increased. I think there was a poll the other day at 50%. Finally approval. I think the Rasmussen tracking poll.
He always does better, Rasmussen.
Yeah, Rasmussen, yes.
But overall, it's in the mid-40s.
And look, I think it was spread in the ABC poll was, at one time it was 49-46 to impeach and remove. Now it's 48 to 46. So it's in the margin of error, but it hasn't swayed the American people one way or the other.
Do you think the Republicans would have been better advised to have actually supported a trial with witnesses, one that was seen as more legitimate on both sides?
I advocated from the very beginning a long trial with a lot. Let them have Bolton, let them have Mulvaney, let them have Pompeo, get all the OMB guys, get the emails.
Get them all in.
Get all in, and let's.
Because nothing new is really going to come out from your perspective.
If all you're going to get is Maggie Haberman in the New York Times weaponizing leaks where they get one side out, let's get these guys and cross-examine them. But in doing that, let's get the whistleblower, let's get Schiff as a fact witness, let's get, I think, Brennan, let's get the security apparatus, let's get Rosenstein up there as a witness with the 40 subpoenas.
You're not suggesting Biden, though.
And I don't think we need Joe Biden, put Hunter Biden up. But even the Bidens, I think, are kind of marginal to my point is that Trump, I call it the trial of the century. He calls it the crime of the century. That it is about a coup to stop a president. So I want all the issues that came up when Devin Nunes had the House intelligence. All those subpoenas, some of them ought to be classified. Yeah. Rosenstein ought to come up as a witness. I think we ought to get into that. The Bidens, to me, are just crony capitalism. It'd be interesting
you
to have
were
him up
worried
there.
at the beginning. You thought that there was a real possibility that the Republicans might actually, in Senate, convict Trump. You didn't think it was a majority likely, but you thought it was plausible.
Not convict. What I said is that this will be a conditional acquittal. That to get the acquittal vote, he would have to give up certain things.
Which he hasn't at all.
Well, you could argue people on the harder side of the Trump of Trump nation will say that the neocon move in Iran, the phase one on China. You remember the China hawks.
He wanted that anyway. He wanted that anyway.
Well, he did, but people would say, "Hey, we should."
But you can't argue he gave anything up in this acquittal.
I would think.
This was a win from his
think
perspective.
it's definitely a win for Trump. Look, history books are going to show he was acquitted. So I think it turned out very well. Now we'll have to see what the price of this is going forward. But I think he performed very well. One of the reasons is I think he convinced the Republican parties in the House. Remember we talked before, it hadn't been the vote. Those 20 that were leaving all voted not to go forward. And the 20 that stayed and didn't like him. So of those 40, he solidified through unity and substance, not one person to leave, and I think that actually got the Senate's focus.
You said that there are no wattage, no star power on the Democratic side, no Obama, and Obama's not saying very much on the sidelines right now.
The wattage you have AOC, who, by the way, Bernie's surge has come since the time Bernie's been in the Senate on trial, and she's been the surrogate.
She's been out there in Iowa. She's done quite well.
Bernie is her third term. It just happens to be the first. So she's the star power, but obviously she's not eligible for the presidency. Everybody else besides that is no star power.
No, but if you were forced to actually vote for one of the people that were out here, who would it be? On the Dem side.
I think they're too well.
I get you.
It'd be Tulsi Gabbard.
You'd say Tulsi.
Tulsi.
Now the Trump guys like Tulsi Gabbard. They come
Tulsi
out
guys
for her.
love her.
Why is that?
Because she's American. She's essentially, I know Tulsi.
They're into surfing.
Tulsi Gabbard's campaign is going to love the fact I said I voted for her, would vote for her. But no, she represents America First national security policy. She's very populist on her economics. She's an American nationalist when it comes to the way she puts the country first in international affairs, and she may be even more of a little bit isolationist, which is to the kind of really hardcore of the Trump side. And I think on best economic policy and on foreign policy, she's
She was
very
like, let
Trumpian.
Assad have it. Why the hell are we in there to begin with? I mean,
Big time.
much more so than anybody
look,
else.
Look, we did have her up and talk to her about joining the administration in the very early days. That's how impressive she was. So I think you find
did
people.
Did she express any interest in that?
Well, she expressed interest in listening. She wanted to come up and see what she has very strong ideas on national security and foreign policy, and she's thought if there was opportunities at the senior level in the State Department or at the UN or in the Defense Department, I think she would have been quite interested. Now, it just didn't turn out to work out. It doesn't mean, but that's the caliber of person she is. Remember, in New Hampshire, most people are saying, if you look at the crowd she's drawing in New Hampshire, a lot of those are Trump voters from 2016.
When she drops out of the presidential campaign, whether it's in a couple weeks or it's a couple months, what do you think the likelihood is that she eventually campaigns, endorses Trump and not the Democratic nominee?
I don't know, but I don't know what her long-term thoughts are about the Democratic Party. Is there room for a populist nationalist in the Democratic Party that has these kind of national security ideas that are different than the mainstream national security apparatus of the Democratic Party? I think she has to think about that.
And you don't think Bernie Sanders is that?
I think Bernie Sanders, as far as commander-in-chief, lacks maturity, lacks understanding. He doesn't really understand China. He's already said, he doesn't agree with the nation's longstanding policy on nuclear weapons. I think as commander-in-chief, he's going to be really challenged. And I think if he's the nominee, it's going to come back to haunt the Democratic Party.
But as an economic populist and an isolationist on the international stage, he does embrace more of that than almost anyone else.
Remember, a lot of the Trump movement, 50-50, is not isolationist. We do have an isolationist aspect of it, no doubt, just like the left has. Most of it is what President Trump's trying to say is America first means America engage with allies, not protectorates. We get away from kind of this imperial foreign policy we've had where NATO's a protectorate, the Gulf Emirates are a protectorate, the littoral nations around the South China Sea are protectorate, Northwest Pacific. So you get that they're really allies. And I think that Bernie's isolationism, I don't think plays with the American people is much stronger. Look, the left, clearly the populist left, I think, and if you listen to Tucker Carlson every night, looks at many of the issues that we look at, we just come up with different solutions. So I think that's why it's a lot of, whether it's Elizabeth Warren or Bernie, the problem is that Bernie and these guys have gone so far to the left on, as far as socialism and socialistic policies. And I really say that if you look at it, the underpinnings of that is kind of modern monetary theory. The basics of a lot of their policies is kind of a rethinking of how we even think about money.
Now, is it right for Trump, from an electoral strategy, to just paint everyone as a socialist on the Democratic side?
Well, he doesn't paint the centrists. He doesn't say
much about Biden, to be fair.
Well,
but
what he says about Biden is about Biden's performances.
Yeah.
Biden's policies are, quite good. He's a globalist. I mean, he's backed to Hillary Clinton. The neoliberal kind of neocon mentality of the central apparatus of the Democratic Party, the corporatists and the Wall Street financiers that really have owned the Democratic Party for so long in the Clinton years, that's that neoliberalism. So I don't think he's seen President Trump, even with Bloomberg, where Bloomberg is the new, the specter that haunts it today. But I think he's rightly said, and this is why I think that they've gone so far to the left, where they could have been very viable, they've gone so far to the left in some of these economic policies, it's going to be quite difficult to win a general election. This is going to be a very tough campaign. Bloomberg's money is really going to change the dynamic in American politics.
Bloomberg even supporting Sanders if he gets the nomination.
Yes,
that's what he said.
With $2 billion. Remember, all the pictures you see.
That's smart for Bloomberg to do strategically, right? I mean, that's their shot of winning.
Michael Bloomberg knows there's very low probability he could be president of the United States.
Yes, right.
Okay, but
requires a brokered convention. Basically.
He's looking for something bigger than that. He's going to do a leverage buyout of the Democratic Party. He's going to put $2 billion or more. Forbes just said the other day he's worth $71 billion. Right when this started, he was worth like 58. Okay, so he's going to put unlimited amount of money to work to defeat Trump. He's going to let off a money thermonuclear weapon on Super Tuesday that's going to shatter this primary. And you're going to have a brokered convention. And Hillary Clinton is sitting there waiting for the call to come in and save the Democratic Party. Biden's not going to do it. Mayor Pete's not going to do it.
If Sanders were to get the nomination, would the right strategy for Trump be to go after Sanders as a socialist, or would the right strategy be to go after Sanders and Bloomberg as globalists that are bought by the big money?
He's going to go after, he definitely should go after the oligarch that wants to be the overlord of the Democratic Party and the White House, which is Michael Bloomberg, and whatever instrument they put up. If it's Bernie Sanders, it's going to be some kind of crazy left-wing socialism. If it's a centrist like Hillary Clinton, which I think eventually will be, right? Because they'll see her as the most controllable and safest bet to take on Trump. With Bloomberg's money, and by the way, $2 billion is just the opening bid. He could put $5 billion.
I still think you're completely nuts on this idea that Hillary Clinton is going to.
I just know they're going to be looking for a savior, and Joe Biden is not going to. He's not going to be. Right now, he's like the character in El Cid. Right? He's this guy they've strapped to the saddle, and they hope they can get through the primaries.
Are you just saying Hillary because you just want to get a rile out of people? No. Is that what it is? You want her to just bite and say something?
As Hillary Clinton will say, look,
I think this is a counterinsurgency fake news branding thing. This is what you did at Breitbart. Is that what you're trying to do? Is this just counterinsurgency, right?
Counterintel.
That's what it is, right? Admit it. Admit it.
No,
this is what you're good at. I know it. Do you like the fact that fake news has become such a big deal in this country?
You know what's so amazing?
Do you like it? Do you like it? Vladimir Putin says this, right? That there is no such thing as truth.
The mainstream media put themselves into this situation. The country's been in decline for 20 or 30 years, the rise of China. Where did you see that? Outside of guys like you every now and again talking about it, experts, where did you see anybody talking about the rise of China? We've had the worst 15 or 20 years by both of them, by Bush and Obama. Okay? The decline of the United States. Look at the Afghan papers. You want to talk about fake news? You show me where the outrage is about the Afghanistan papers. Show me where the outrage is. You know why the mainstream media won't talk about it? Because they're complicit. And that's where they want to walk away from it. So don't talk to me about some blogger and fake news. It's total bull.
I'm not talking about that.
You're talking about some marginality. You won't get to the heart of it. Get to the heart of it. The heart of it is that the media is different than they were in the 70s when they held the government accountable. Now they're in partnership with it. The permanent political clash. You saw this in the impeachment. Every night cheerleading, the Russia thing, this, bing, ba-bang. They are on the side of the permanent apparatus, and that's what the American people on the left and on the right are rejecting.
Do we need a BBC in the United States?
Good God, no.
What do we need?
Why do we need a BBC? BBC, have you lost your mind? Look how bad they've been on Brexit. They're terrible. There's plenty of good sources out there. You just gotta find them. There's capitalist guys starting up. You just gotta find it. American people, number one. It's also upon the American people who have responsibility of citizenship. This is why I love the AOCs of the world. I love the fact she's doing her nightly cooking show and talking about civics, the kids who don't get civics lessons anymore.
Yeah.
I don't dig her policies. I like her, and here's what I like the most about her. She's a bartender. She's not some stiff lawyer we got too many of. She's somebody that worked for $8.50 an hour on the midnight shift. She knows how bad it is and how tough it is to have to pay rent, okay? And now she's giving civics lessons. Disagree with the policies? I like the approach. The Republicans and the populists need more of that. We need fewer lawyers. But you want to talk about the fake news? It is so bad, the misinformation that is given to the American people because the established order thinks that's the way it should be.
Now, so let's pivot to the global, and maybe the easy way to do that. A lot of people at Davos this year pretty aligned with a lot of the policies that Trump is on about. Certainly in terms of trade, they're happier than they were a couple of years ago.
But I think that's people coming towards Trump. Remember, when he first started with these tariffs, and even the concept of tariffs, a complete apostate, right? It was looked at as against the orthodoxy. You sit there today, and people realize that his trade policies are starting to work. I think Bank of America, one of their analytics groups that studies industrial corporations that represent, I think, $15 or $20 trillion of market cap, said that you can see a tectonic plate shift, that people are starting to look to move supply chains out of China and start to move supply chains, maybe start in East Asia. But they're looking at, and they don't call it nationalism, they call it localism, where you're going to have more local nodes in this global, supply chain.
In part because Chinese labor is more expensive than it was, and also because labor's not as much of a piece of the manufacturing equation. So if that's true, you're going to be closer to where the customers are.
I actually think, and it was such a good line that you used, I stole it, so I use it as an homage. I think one of the most important parts of this is where you said a while ago the most important geopolitical event of 2019 were the Chinese announcing they were going to go through their own
technological system
and requirements. That is a fundamental outlook of how the CCP sees real decoupling. And I think the corporations understood that we've got to mitigate our risk here. I think I'm a little more hardcore than President Trump is. President Trump sometimes is more practical and more pragmatic.
You didn't want the phase one trade deal. You didn't want it at all.
No.
You think the Chinese are only going to get stronger. We need to hit them hard now when we have more of an advantage.
I think the Chinese Communist Party is the same type of gangsters that ran the Soviet Union, the same type of gangsters that ran Italy and ran Nazi Germany and ran Imperial Japan. I think they're just another set of gangsters, and they lie about everything. They lied about the Hong Kong deal. They lied about the deal they signed with President Obama on cyber security and the militarization of the South China Sea. They lied about the Paris Accord. President Trump, I think, put together the best deal that you could have at the time, given the reality on the ground.
So
we'll have to see how it works.
You believe that there's a Cold War between the U.S. and China right now?
I do not. I think I think there's the Chinese describe as three types of war by unrestricted warfare: information, cyber, economic, and kinetic. Mm-hmm. I think there's a hot war on both information, cyber, and economics. I think they've been at war with us for 20 years. That's why I kept saying that deal, this is all an armistice. It's not a trade deal. It's really an armistice and an economic war. That armistice would have been an armistice that could have brought us peace and prosperity and working together into one system.
Three stole,
Yeah, but into one entire system, including the technology. It's the Chinese made a conscious decision in the spring of 2019 that we're going to go a different way. Right, we are going to. These two systems cannot work together. We have a way we roll. The industrial West, not just the United States, has a way they roll.
So let's talk about the thing that's most concerning people about China right now, which is coronavirus emanating from Wuhan. Clearly, the Chinese government didn't handle this well to begin with. You're being
much too charitable.
Well, I mean,
they knew about this in December. Okay, and they knew about this through the. We now know the cab
drivers. 8
doctors
on the ground.
8 doctors who were arrested,
essentially,
right?
To allow them to.
And also the cab drivers in WhatsApp, WeChat.
What's the correct American response to a potential pandemic, an outbreak right now, more serious than SARS was? Given the level of interlinkage that our countries, our people, our economies have? What should Trump be doing?
I think the first step is what he did. In a complex system, I think you have to mitigate risk a little bit, maybe overreact immediately so you don't have to have draconian measures later on. Dr. Gabriel, I think it's Leung in Hong Kong, who's the great virus fighter, who was the individual who helped put down SARS. He's been saying for weeks, he's one of the ones that advocates Hong Kong close the border. He's been saying for weeks, what's happening in Wuhan, the scale of it, has never happened before in human history as far as the quarantine goes, and that the Chinese government, CCP, even if they were well-intentioned in trying to do it, it'll be beyond them to try to quarantine this. So we have to start taking very tough measures today. I think what President Trump's doing, I think you're seeing this. Number one, offer the CDC and other great organizations throughout the world to go and assist the Chinese Communist Party, to go assist. What we should do now, I think, is try to make sure we limit it to China as much as possible. Number two, remember the victims here are the Chinese people, right? Whether we need to do fundraisers here or relief funds, et cetera, is to think about how you get, because now you see the breakdown of their logistics system.
Because Trump's first orientation usually is not towards how do we raise humanitarian aid for people that aren't in the United States. I mean, even Puerto Rico, which is a part of the United States, he was criticized for.
But look, I disagree. Look what he did. Look what he did for the first 2 weeks of this with Xi. He was saying he had Xi's back. Xi's telling me he has this under control. We'll work with the Chinese. Remember, these tweets are out there saying, "Hey, Xi tells me it's under control. We will support it." You know, people shouldn't raise their level of concern. But when it became evident that Xi doesn't have control of this, that's when I think the president stepped forward with very, very measured response. Remember, right now, what you're hearing coming out of Wuhan is literally a breakdown of the public health infrastructure.
I hear from you a lot the idea that if we want to do this effectively, it's not just the Americans. We need our allies too, right? We need, whether it's talking about responding to the pandemic crisis, or it's talking about Chinese cyber or trade. We need the Japanese. We need the South Koreans. We need the Europeans. One of the things I see that is happening over the last few years is that Trump administration's America First policy is making it harder for those other allies to feel like the U.S. is engaging with them, that they should want to cooperate with, participate with the United States in dealing with the Chinese, the bigger threat. I understand that you
disagree with that totally, but I see your point.
But I say that.
But let's
talk about both of those things.
This was the whole thing that got me about when you said the separation of the two technology systems. I said we kind of need a NATO of technology so that Japan, South Korea, Western Europe, and the United States come together at least on agreement, because we're not totally in sync with the Europeans right now.
We're not even close.
Okay, but that has to happen. But here's what I think the Trump administration, remember, let's talk about reality, not fantasy. Okay, NATO and Western Europe had become a protectorate of the United States. It was NATO and the countries in NATO that came up with, we need to get to 2% of our GDP.
Correct.
Right? Because we can't defend ourselves, we can't defend. The alliance hadn't become an alliance. The countries in Europe, and particularly the worst offender was Germany. They were putting really no resources into equipment, into operability, into training.
They were spending about half of what they're commitments
and what Trump said, and by the way, it's the General Secretary of NATO that says Trump's done more to strengthen the alliance than any president he's ever seen. Because he said, hey, we're here committed. The United States is putting more resources in. Okay? America First, many of us are veterans that have kids in the military today. We're not isolationists, say come home. We say we don't want America to be the policeman of the world, but we want to be in partnership where it's in the vital national security of Western Europe for NATO, or the Gulf Emirates, or around the South China Sea, or Northwest Pacific. Yes, those allies have skin in the game with their kids and their money.
Now, the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, you don't hate, right, is actually not supporting the United States on 5G and Huawei.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the Board of Advisors of Huawei. This goes to the rot. Remember, Nigel Farage is my guy over there. Boris Johnson, I think, has done an excellent job and gotten it home. But let's talk about Huawei. You look at the rot in the British establishment, okay? All the former, Tony Blair and all the former prime ministers they have on the board, all the guys in the House of Lords making money off the Chinese and Huawei, they're the ones in British Telecom, they're the ones that have gotten this Huawei situation where it is. They're in a very tough situation, how they even unwind it, how in bed they are. And why are they in bed? They're bought and paid for. This is an outrage.
So what should we do to the UK if they refuse to take our fairly strong advice on leaving Huawei aside and working with the Americans, the Europeans?
I think it's going to be very dramatic.
Look,
this could be the beginning of not being in the Five Eye program, of not sharing intelligence information. Huawei is not associated with the Chinese government. Huawei is the technology arm of the PLA. Okay,
the People's Liberation Army.
And the British understand this. The British aristocracy, the British establishment that's in bed with the CCP, that has to be highlighted. Pompeo goes over the other day and says the CCP. Is
this the equivalent of like German, like former Chancellor Schroeder with Transneft and the Russians? Is it that level of depth and corruption? What we're seeing with the UK and Huawei right now?
I don't know if it's that level of depth and corruption. They're clearly advisors on the board. Back then, I actually think it went to kickbacks. I'm not saying it's anything to do with kickbacks, but clearly they have a whole series of advisors right, that are advising them and take on board memberships and taking money. That has to stop. Mike Pompeo goes over and lays out the administration's point. Pompeo says, number one, the CCP is the existential threat to not just the United States, but the entire West and the world. Mm-hmm. And he said, this is going to have major ramifications, including on the intelligence sharing side. So I think we've got very tough conversations. And the British want to know, we've supported them, obviously, in Brexit and with doing a trade deal with them, but this is going to have big-time implications.
Now, Nigel Farage is your guy, and obviously he's been the no-compromise Brexit no matter what. Why, I mean, I know you're going to disagree with this, but why don't we want a stronger...
Did I telegraph that badly?
Why don't we want a stronger Europe allied with the United States that supports rule of law?
We do.
We do. A stronger European Union. Why don't we want that?
That's two different things.
I know.
A union of nations, of strong independent nations. The Westphalian system has worked pretty well for the West, okay? That's what we're talking about. A robust France under Le Pen, a robust Italy under Salvini, that are great allies of the West and great allies of the United States. Independence, a Europe of nations, not a United States of Europe, okay? Because the people in Europe don't even want that. That's where you're seeing the populist nationalist movement grow every day, and that's what the United Kingdom is.
Now, polite society establishment probably is most irritated with you in terms of your alignment with these populists in Europe. Right, I mean the Le Pen.
I think they're most upset about my alignment with Donald Trump. But the second is because they think Trump's the font of all evil.
Maybe, but it's still Trump also gets support of half of the country and support. I mean, mainstream media in the United States, Fox's mainstream media certainly supports Trump. Yeah. Where in the case of Le Pen, Salvini, Orban, I mean, these are people that are sort of considered beyond the pale.
Let's look at our great presidents. Look at Lincoln. Look at FDR. Look at Reagan.
Yep.
They all look at the time that they're there, they're entirely divisive. Lincoln was a minority president, okay? Fought against his own generals to win the Civil War. Almost had a coup against him by his high command before Antietam in the Emancipation Proclamation. Look at FDR. All he had to go through, right, in fighting and winning World War II and actually making sure we were ready for World War II. It vilified, called a devil. Look at Reagan. You remember Reagan when, in hindsight,
it looked terrific. I was alive during Reagan,
unlike
those other presidents.
Yes. They say their demonstrations here. I said, hey, there were 2 million people in Central Park saying Reagan was a demon for trying to put tactical nuclear weapons into Western Germany. All of those individuals, not just when they were running for office, when they had office, look at Churchill, were the most divisive characters of their age. Only in hindsight do they look like they unified. You know why? Because they took the country to another level.
I'm talking about the fact that there are lots of people that live in these countries that are not well-to-do. They're immigrants.
Are there a lot of people in the United States of America? I think we're pretty divided today.
We are.
I think that's healthy. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think we're a mature nation, and we like political fights. We've changed the dynamic in this country, okay? Populist on the left and populist on the right, and it's a healthy thing.
Steve Bannon.
Thanks.
Good to see you. That's it for the podcast this week. We'll be back in your feed next week. Check out full episodes of GZERO World on public television or at gzeromedia.com.
The GZERO World podcast is brought to you by our founding sponsor, First Republic. First Republic, a private bank and wealth management company, places clients' needs first by providing responsive, relevant, and customized solutions. Visit firstrepublic.com to learn more.
You're listening to the GZERO World with Ian Bremmer podcast, your weekly geopolitical deep dive into the world's biggest news stories, featuring in-depth conversations with global leaders and newsmakers. To get more of GZERO's insights on global politics every morning, sign up for our free newsletter, GZERO Daily, at gzeromedia.com.